Hi, my name is Eddie Stevens, and I am a partner in the law firm Stevens and Stevens. I am also vice chair of the board of directors and director of legal education for the Center for Child Counseling. Every year, we interview all the people who have passed the Marital and Family Board Certification exam. We've done this now for 3 years. This year, we interviewed all 6 test passers, and we had a great experience. I'd like to personally thank all 6 folks who sat down for interviews to give us their tips, their thoughts on how to approach and pass this test. The 2022 class of board cert attorneys are Stephen D. Gregg, Krista Mahalak, Andrew Nickolaou, Andrew Reeder, Chris Rumbold, and Andy Wilson. And it was great. I just sent them an email and asked if they would sit down with me and talk to me about the test and their thoughts. And everybody I have made this query to has enthusiastically helped out. I think that shows you the fact that these folks who reach the level of board certification are certainly in tune to helping others and providing service to the profession. So, but for their participation, this program would not be possible. You are going to hear 2 hours of thoughts and tips and processes and techniques, and from the 6 attorneys who passed. So without further ado, welcome to Tips for Board Cert Marital and Family Law 2023 edition.
Stephen Squibbs presents this month's board certification tip.
And hello, we are back with Steve Gregg, who is one of the 6 attorneys who have passed the board certification exam in 2022. Steve, welcome to our little program and congratulations on such an epic feat.
Thank you so much.
So you are like one of the attorneys that passed the bar 7 years in, and there's a very small group of those attorneys. So not only did you pass board cert, but you approached it with a sense of urgency that, I think only a handful of people have done. So, congrats on hitting that incredible milestone.
Thank you.
Very early in your career.
Starting law school later in life compresses things.
What did you do before
the time frame? Well, I originally, my father's a divorce lawyer. I'm from Dayton, Ohio. That's what I was going to do. I got into college and I started a year late, took a year, and thought I wanted to go to medical school because I had really gotten into fitness and personal training. And by the time I got to my 4th year and there were dead bodies and things like that, I knew this wasn't for me. So I switched gears. I continued personal training for a while and doing a little process serving, stuff like that for my dad. And my fiance had gotten into vet school, so I had followed her and deferred law school anyways. And made my way back to Dayton and started law school at 33.
Cool. And now you have that seasoned look to you, and and you have the credentials to back it up. So
yeah.
What did you think when
that
you
was
got
the
that
urgency?
What did you think when you got that email that let you know that you had passed?
I thought it was a joke. It happened right next to my birthday, as well as about a month after the passing of, 9 days after my mom passed. So it was kind of a lot was going on at the time. And I had just come in the office for the first time, I think, since finding out, kind of trying to dig out an email and stuff like that. And that one just pops up at the top of my email. So, it made that day.
Oh, that's a cool way to change your perspective. Only 6 people passed. So I know 20 something
Really?
people,
Wow.
20 something people took it. So um, a lot of people say that passage rate like is not fair and not reflective. Now that you have taken the
Yeah.
test, would you agree that it is a fair test, or do you think it's too hard?
I don't know if I have a good gauge on it, only because the first times I took it, the advice I got from other people was so terrible. Study for 2 weeks, study for, just read Barbara Abrams. She used to have those kind of condensed little snippets of case law that you could order through Lexis, things like that. And the first two times I didn't pass. I wasn't within even appealing distance. In 2020, I changed firms. Belinda Lazara and Kevin Brennan are both partners at the firm where I'm at now.
Big
They,
advocates of board cert.
yeah. So the first thing they told me, because I had just taken it, they said, "Are you scheduled to review your exam?" I said, "No." They said, "Okay, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. You got to do that." And then when it was time to study, they said, "This isn't a 2 week affair. This is a 6 month affair. This is you start in August and, take the test in March." So I just did exactly what they said. I also, Belinda had told me right when I came on board that she had been reading Florida Law Weekly since she started with Peter Maros every week religiously. So I started doing that at the same time. So combining, reading Florida Law Weekly every week, making it a habit, and studying the appropriate amount of time, it didn't seem too terrible. It felt like the bar exam, but the prior times I completely felt like it was arbitrary, but that may just be that I was really unprepared.
So when you went about the approach of studying for this in a serious manner, what resources did you use to study from?
Sure.
You got the red books.
The touchstone was the red books. I used 2 years of green books. So I started reading case law in, I think, September of 21, and I would kind of outline briefly, very bullet point kind of things I pulled from the cases. And then I read through the entire red books and outlined them. I made those the kind of foundation of my outline, and then supplemented with the additional cases that I had read, kind of merged those two outlines into one. And then, by the time it was my last couple of weeks of studying, it was really just going over and over the outline, as well as some note cards and stuff I had made for, you got to memorize the factors and all that stuff.
Did you approach it with a study group or did you go solo? How did you
I'm very much a self-starter, and also prefer my own companies a lot of times. So just be with a cigar at 6 o'clock at night after I got home from work, study, and cut it off after an hour or two. I increased the amount of time I was studying as I got closer.
and did did you keep track of the total hours by any chance? Do you know like what
I
it took?
did.
What's that
Yeah,
number?
I once it was what I honestly don't remember. I kept an Excel spreadsheet because I'm kind of a geek that way, but it was definitely kissing 150 plus hours of total time spent.
And when you took
I
it
mean,
this
it's
past
you have to
year,
devote the time.
when you took it this past year, did you take it live or did you take it where you're being watched through the computer?
Yeah, it was through the computer. I was in this office, it's my home office, and that was kind of strange, but I just followed the directions, kept my hands on the table, and didn't talk to anybody or look around or do anything. So
If you had the option to do it live or from home, what would you prefer now that you've done it?
I mean, seems like it's more rife, possible to cheat at home, which I wouldn't want. But personally, as a comfort thing, it was much more comfortable to do it at home. You don't need to have shoes on. You can have flip flops. You can, I don't know, your coffee, everything you want is there when it's time to take a break. So yeah, I would definitely prefer at home.
Well, technically, you can wear flip flops live too.
Well, that's true.
I think I did my test in sweatpants, sweatshirt, and socks and flip flops. So I was a ridiculous looking test taker. Is there, now that you've studied for it and passed, is there anything you would go back and do differently?
Other than just do it this way the first time, I can remember being at the nibbles and tidbits or the little board cert review, the first time I was going to take it, which would have been 2019, I think. And one of the speakers said something like, there are a lot of people who have been licensed for a short period of time and they take the exam, and we can always tell those people because the answers are a little too superficial. I just think it was all of the studying that was necessary because, the trial and experience and stuff I had for a while. I wasn't concerned about that. It was really just organizing the knowledge in a way that made it easily available to me to repeat it, in an exam setting, because it's just so much information.
Yeah, they pretty much test you on everything. They give you the core.
They really do.
And
nothing's off limits, just about.
So you do have to have a mastery, and I do think just taking the test makes you a better lawyer, even if you
100%.
So all these folks that are in the majority and did not pass it, not only do they have a head start next year because they're familiar with what the process is, but just forcing yourself to learn this stuff is
100%.
is making you to a higher standard. Is there
definitely much more effective.
Any specific tips that you would want to give our listeners who are thinking right now of making that August deadline of applying to do this next year?
Well, I would just say if you're going to do it, you got to make sure you're really committed. I'm kind of extreme about things. I take them always to as far as I can go, whether it's, I play guitar as a hobby or playing chess or something. I never stop. So if you're going to take this exam, you've got to make sure that you know how much is following, because if you pay the money and take the time even just to fill out the application, it's a shame to waste all of that if you're not going to do the work. Because even the application, that's a 20-hour affair at least, recreating all your trials and figuring out what you did for discovery. That's not a small thing.
That's a good idea to download the app, even if you're not imminently taking the test, so you could see the type of information that they require.
Oh yeah.
And that's also where they pull peer review from. Who better to send peer review than attorneys you've had trials with. So
they actually scrutinize that list of trials and cases you do, because the first time I applied, I had to replace some with others because they want actual legitimate discovery beyond mandatory disclosure or some 50,000 paragraph request for production.
I served 6 years on the board cert committee, which I definitely recommend you do. I think it's the most meaningful committee in the Florida bar, and certainly the toughest.
Okay.
But just seeing it from their side, and that's really where you take your knowledge to a whole nother level, because being able to grade these exams
that sounds great.
So when you get the committee preference from the Florida bar, not the section, give it a shot.
Yeah.
And,
that sounds great.
I did it for 6 years, and it was hard, but it was really what I think has been my most meaningful work with the Florida bar. So just something for you to
That's
check
very
out.
Cool.
Since not too many people
absolutely
hit this at your level of experience. So there's got to be something special about you, Stephen. Anything else you want to share?
Just an idiot fell backwards. fell backwards into a good situation. That's all.
Me too. Or anything else you want to share with our listeners who are all now motivated to go fill out this horrendous application that we're scaring them about, but it's really not so bad. It's really not that bad. You just fill out every detail about every case you've ever tried
Yeah.
in your life.
Yeah, it's worse than filling out a judge to be nominated for the judicial
7
nominating committee.
A1s, and you have the
Oh yeah.
A2s and
Oh God. Now I'm having a flashback to August. Um, yeah, other than just really taking it seriously, I think it's absolutely key that you read Florida Law Weekly as a habit, because one of the things I noticed, and this is something Belinda told me, and just so the listeners know, Belinda Lazara is the lawyer I'm talking about. She is one of the finest lawyers I know, and I take a lot of my cues imitating some of the things in her practice. She really takes a lot of time. Anyways,
she's also
reading the Florida law.
she's an amazing writer too.
Yes, she is. When I have writing assignments, when I'm working cases with her, everything comes back thrashed with red, which is what I want it to be, because this is the only way you get better. Steel sharpens steel, and she doesn't hold back, but it's all meaningful. And each time simple, something as simple as drafting a supplemental petition for modification and the allegations of the substantial change section, she'll scrutinize so that it is not just a series of bullet points about the parade of horribles of the other parent, but an actual narrative that tells a story that's more persuasive. So yeah, she's a fantastic writer and just absolutely wonderful lawyer. But what she said to me was, not only is reading Florida Law Weekly as a habit a good thing, so you know all the family law cases, you're on top of whatever's cutting, but when you study for the exam, the green books, you will be reading it for the second time, which is putting it deeper in your memory. So I would say the very most important things are read that Florida Law Weekly, get your 2 years of green books. And I would start, probably what I did was I used the prior year's red books to get started reading and outlining, because there's just too much of a time crunch between when you get them at the end of January and the test in March.
And they don't
And the changes aren't too,
They usually just pick up the previous year's materials.
Right. The changes aren't too dramatic. Unless there's some big case or, cause overhauled by 61075 or something, then you're going to be fine.
And you can always get the green Florida Law Weekly books a little early by asking them for the pre-published ones.
I ordered the bound ones, or I ordered the ring bound ones, so I got them early.
Yeah, I agree. Reading the cases for me is the best way to learn, and then I write about them, and for some reason that's what it takes for me to learn and have the stuff stick in my head. And I know we're all a little different, so the key is finding what works best for you, and that's why we like to chat with everybody who has passed this test. And Steve, thank you for imparting your knowledge, sharing your wisdom, and being a part of our program.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Eddie. I appreciate it. I've read your Stephen Squibbs since I got to Florida in 2015 from Ohio, and I will continue to do so.
Well, whenever you have
thanks for your time.
Problem sleeping, I highly recommend it. It's great.
Or if you're just a family law nerd like me.
Well, there's a bunch of us, Steve, and you are now in an exclusive group, and your standard for malpractice has changed, so watch out for that.
I gotcha.
Steve, great talking to you, and if we can ever return the favor, just let us know.
Sure. I'll see you at board cert next year.
And with us today is newly board certified attorney Krista Mahalak out of Winter Haven, Florida. Krista, welcome and congratulations on this most epic achievement.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all the support through these CLEs and podcasts and different things you do on the web.
Well, it's my secret of staying up to date with the law, and just by doing this process makes it stick in my head forever. So you're actually like watching me learn this stuff, because it takes a lot for this stuff to stick in my head. And speaking of sticking stuff in your head, the board certified family law test is a beast. And they give you core and subcore materials, and I think it's safe to say you're going to be tested on everything. how did you go about learning all of these areas they told you to study?
Well, I don't know if I learned all of them, but hopefully learned them enough to get through the exam. The key thing I think in the red books on the little chapters in the back that they at the board certification um, meeting in January at the presentation, they don't present on all of the topics, but there's a lot of little topics like interspousal tort immunity or military and divorce and those types of things that are in little sections in the back. And I think it's really important to try to do those.
Yeah, they make great true false short answer type questions. And what materials did you use when you were studying?
So I took the red books and I took the PDFs that you get from the review course and I put them all on my Kindle. So I have 2 little kids, and so whenever I was doing stuff with them, like giving them a bath or doing whatever I was doing, if I was going places, I would have everything on my Kindle and I would read it that way. So I think that helped rather than like taking the giant red books of it.
Any other resources besides the board cert red books and looking at the law?
I mean, I literally read the statutes. I did always read your squibs also, but I would go through and read the entire statutes and was writing them out. I actually took the test twice. So the second year that I took it, I found that based on a tip I think I heard on this, somebody said, you know, you absorb the information a lot better if you write. And I think maybe I didn't have the best study skills going into this. So I did find that writing things out helped me retain them.
Yeah, that's the way I memorize everything. In fact, I have my squib book here. Is where in constant motion, and this is just a years of like case law material. I literally write every case out, and then my team types it up and edits it. But just the experience for me of using longhand to write something out, I've just learned that learning technique for me is the best, but other people use flashcards, sound device, like mnemonics. Some people just can memorize, some people are genius, and first time they see something, it sticks. But for me, I found if I can write it out, which is very labor intensive, but it works, and I was able to pass too. Did you take the first time you take it, was it the exact year before, or did you take a break?
It was the exact year before.
So you're the COVID years where you're doing it did you take the second test at home or did you go to the central location?
I did take the second test from my office right here where I'm sitting.
And how would you describe those experiences? Because you did it twice.
The first time it was just as COVID was getting really bad. I don't know that had that much of an impact on it. I did think it was nice to be at my own desk with my own computer set up the way that I would typically do it and just kind of more comfortable. And the hotel that they had you stay at that we stayed at is very nice, but it's just nice to be able to be at your own place, not have to travel at all. So if I had my choice to take it a third time, which hopefully will never have to happen, I would, if I had an option, I would probably do it in my own office.
I wonder if they're going to keep offering that as an option, because it is labor intensive, because all those proctors staring at you while you take the test for 6 hours or 8 hours. It's a little nerve-wracking watching your eye contact and stuff. When I took it in 2004, we had blue books, and being able to take it on your computer was a new thing, and they would put software on your computer that locked everything, and I was just paranoid that would mess with me because it was one of the first years, so I just blue booked it. Did you write narrative answers to these essay questions, or did you just kind of outline bullet them?
I wrote narrative answers, and I also I think I saw this tip somewhere, but I would organize the answers by subtopic within it. So if it's an equitable distribution question and you're addressing the distribution of all the assets. So you start with, your non-marital assets or something, and then home and stocks and things like that, just to sort of, nothing fancy, because you really don't have any time to be fancy, but I think it helps break up the answer maybe a little if you try to make some little quick cuttings.
Did you have any time left over after the questions, or were you basically up against the wall or running out?
Oh yeah, both times. I mean, I think the first year I really ran out on a question and maybe got, a third or halfway through the essay, and that I mean, it's just, as you know, it's all you can do to get words on the paper to answer all those questions in that amount of time. It's a real time crunch.
Do you have any other tips that you would offer folks that are either thinking about taking the test or gearing up to take the test next year and they're getting their apps in? What do you think?
I live in Central Florida, and so I don't have a lot of the same necessarily jurisdictional questions or issues come up in practice as much as maybe some of the South Florida attorneys. So if you're from a smaller community, I would encourage people to, where you don't run into a lot of those issues, to really focus on those, because it seems like that's something that's always going to be tested on, and they're more difficult concepts to kind of grasp and learn, I think, if you're not practicing those. And also, there's a smaller community of attorneys here where I didn't know anybody else locally who was taking the exam at the same time. So I did, take as many CLEs as possible and watch, these types of interviews you did and other things, just to kind of gain a sense of familiarity with the process. And, so that you don't feel like you're kind of doing it alone. You've got you and the other people involved in these kind of presentations who are supporting the community.
Well, cool. I bet you are going to know a lot more people now that you have this designation, because, it is only 6 people out of 20 something passed. And, since I've been involved for 20 years, there's been criticism that pass rate is too low and they make this test too hard. Now that you have, struggled and overcome, do you think that this test represents fairly, the knowledge base a board certified attorney should have?
That's such a challenging question. I mean, it's to put it in perspective, I think I don't know, at least like 10 times harder than the bar exam. And I took the bar exam in another state first and then came here. But I mean, the Florida bar exam, so people have their different opinions on how difficult that is. But I think this is far more challenging. So I don't have a good answer to that. I know people usually say, no, it's fair, but maybe there's more of a way to take off a little bit of the time pressure or make things a little bit less complex. But then it's also somewhat subjective. You do have real people grading the tests. I think all those people try to do their absolute best in grading them, but there is going to be a human element of one person might think an answer is better than the next tester, and they do everything they can to make it fair. So I wouldn't say it was unfair, but I don't know that I would necessarily say that it shouldn't be easier.
And after test 1, did you go look at the answers to see what you did and what you should have done?
Oh yes, I definitely did take the opportunity to review the answers, and I think because of, or I know it was remote, and I think if it wasn't COVID, I wouldn't have had that option. I think I would have maybe had to go to, maybe it's just Tampa, but I have a feeling maybe it was Tallahassee.
No, they make you go to Tallahassee to look at it. They make you go to the Florida bar, and you get like a couple hours, and you can bring one person, and you can look at it and make that decision if you're going to appeal it.
Yeah,
was that
appalled by how bad my answers
was looking at the model answers helpful in taking the test a second time to see what they were looking for?
I think so. I think that if somebody doesn't pass and they want to look at I'd say there's really no reason not to look at the model answers. I don't think there's a lot of repetition from year to year. I don't recall there being much repetition of even multiple choice answers or anything like that. Maybe there is a little bit, but it's not as though you're going to go and be like, oh, now I know the answer to that question. But I don't know any reason you wouldn't do it other than if you just can't make it work in your schedule. I think it'd be beneficial to see what their expectations are, because you read the model answer and you're like, wow, this person had like 8 hours to write just the signature. It's phenomenal.
I don't think they ever repeat questions. At least I was on the board cert for 6 years after I passed, and every year was a brand new test. And we took a lot of pride in writing those questions. And I cannot think of a more demanding Florida Bar Committee than the board cert committee. So now that you've passed, something to consider if you're looking for a way to serve the bar. That was a really good one. A lot of work, but a really fun experience. Well, Krista, we are super happy and proud of you. And the fact that our programming helps you in some way warms my heart, because it means we're doing something good. So thank you for your comments, and we look forward to see what you do with this awesome thing you have now attained in your career. You'll see it makes like an immediate difference, just because you get the swagger. So walk with confidence, and thanks for taking your time to share your wisdom with our listeners today.
Thank you so much.
All right, Krista, have a great day, and thank you so much.
You too.
And ladies and gentlemen, we have our first board certified tip of the month, and we have newly board certified attorney Andrew Nickolaou, who just passed the 2022 exam. Andrew, how are you doing today?
Good. Thank you for asking, and thank you for having me today.
And congratulations. First of all, board certification is epic. Secondly, you did it in 7 years, and I only know 2 other attorneys that have done that so quickly, which I think is amazing. So congratulations on being a part of a very select group that decided to get board certified. And these qualifications are not easy. The trials, the peer review. So you're in a very special group. So congratulations, Andrew, and getting your hands around this material so early in your career. And I'm one of the 3 attorneys too. So I can tell you, being board certified in 2004, when I got my license in 97, I've been an attorney now 25 years and board certified most of that time. And it has been a great feather in my cap, and I am sure you will wear it well. So congrats.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So let's talk about the test and your approach to it. And, there's a lot of people that are watching and listening and are pretty terrified about this test, mainly because of the low passage rate. And it's the hard test. What steps did you take to figure out what you had to memorize, what you had to study? Where'd you start off?
So I think the best way to start is to start early because this actually was my second time taking it. So I did take it the year prior, and I did not pass. I missed it by I can't remember the exact amount of points, but a few points, enough to be like, are you kidding me? I was so close, and I just missed it. And obviously I wanted to retake it right away, because they do allow you to take it a second time without having to wait any period of time. And I thought that was going to be very beneficial. So
after you took it the first time, did you go check out your test and look at it?
Absolutely. Which, if anyone has taken it and does not pass it, I completely 110% recommend doing that, because I believe that played a great role in me ultimately passing the second time around. And I will also say that it was a little bit different probably than prior years and attorneys that have passed it because of COVID. So the first year I took it, the 2021 year that I took it, it was virtual, and that was the first year that I believe, to my understanding, that they were offering it in a virtual setting, which was extremely stressful in and of itself. I mean, the fact
Having-
of having to go in person and taking it out would have been stressful, but then changing it up to be virtual and making sure that you had everything ready to go, and making sure all these other things that you had to do, because they use special software that literally records the whole thing, tracks your eye movements, tracks whatever else that you were doing during it. And so that, I think, added a very high level of stress, because I tend to fidget a lot, and I tend to kind of look off the screen a lot, and lose my train of thought, or when I'm thinking I kind of look away. And so I feel like in that first year, that impacted the time that I had taking that exam, because I was, in the back of my mind, I think subconsciously, thinking about all the other things in the environment. This year I also took it virtual. They basically they changed it a little bit, where you could do it in person, but you wouldn't be able to use the computer. So if anyone was crazy enough to want to handwrite the board certification exam, then they could have gone in person this year. But I would imagine that most people ended up doing the virtual option. But in having the experience from the prior year, I already knew what to expect with the software, and I made sure I was in a very quiet environment, that wasn't going to be distracting, and I was already planning and prepping and focusing for the time restrictions that, in my opinion, are the biggest roadblock that an attorney has in passing this board certification exam.
Did you keep track of the hours you spent each year of studying? And if so, would you share that with us?
Absolutely. So the first time I took it, I did not study enough. I thought that I studied enough, but I quickly realized that I did not. First of all, I didn't start soon enough. I think, once you submit your application, I believe the deadline is usually by like the end of August. You really should start planning and timing out almost like a study schedule for, September, October, November, December, where you can at least start, getting some study time in, going over cases, and actually coming up with a plan. And then as you get into January, and especially, if you're going to be attending the cert review, seminar in January, that's when, you really probably want to start picking it up. That first year I took it, I didn't really plan as well, or listen to the advice of watching, things like, what you put on of past people that, took it, and, the other things that are available and resources that are available, and I didn't really start too much in terms of planning and studying, at the end of the year after I applied. I started getting things together and materials and stuff like that, but not really kind of digging into the studying and the books and all of that. And so I really probably honestly did not start studying until January, and then the exam is in March. And I don't think I tracked the amount of hours that I spent, but just in that time frame alone, it wasn't enough. I honestly, I don't think I felt ready going into the exam the first time I took it in 2021. And even after taking the exam that day, I was like, I really did not think that I passed it, because there was some stuff on there. I'm like, I don't even remember looking at that in the materials that I studied. Granted, I preface that by saying that the bar likes to put stuff on there that I don't think any family law attorney probably knows, and you probably have to guess, because that's something you would have to typically look up in the rules anyway, because it's just so out there.
Well, it's a comprehensive test, and they do give you the core and subcore, and it is a difficult test. There's not only the memorization, but the application, and being a past chair of the committee that would write and grade the test. Everything is going to be tested. And
Yep.
I think you have to go in there just assuming you have to know everything. And then there's a bit of luck, on what things you know better and how you apply it. So what materials did you, well, for year two, did you keep track of the hours, or do you have any idea?
For year two, I probably easily spent, just studying alone, probably not even counting the time of actually putting all the materials and everything together, probably 200 hours, I would say, just studying. I spent a lot of time. I literally had blocked myself off, from work, and, was spending hours in the months leading up to it. And then as it got closer, I mean, I was pretty much blocking myself out for the entire week and then breaking it into portions and areas of studying. So it was a substantial amount of time that I invested into it because I really wanted to make sure that I passed the second time around. I also took different approaches to studying it because obviously, having gone through it the first time, I realized I was not ready, that there was a lot, to still focus on and to study and to make sure that I understood and comprehended, because like you said, a lot of it, it's not just of, hey, I recognize what that is. It's how am I going to apply it to this fact pattern and explain it in a way that actually makes sense to the person that's grading it, but also in a concise manner, because that is the other thing that you really have to focus and train yourself on in studying is time management. And if you don't, or if you are a long-winded type of attorney that likes to write pages and pages and pages in your motions or briefs or anything like that, then you really need to focus on the time management part, because it is very easy, and I learned that the first time around, to get that essay question and to really just kind of sit there and say, oh, I know exactly what I need to explain to them and how to answer this. But then you realize you're spending way, way, way too much time on that one issue. And then you've got another 20 different issues that you really need to touch on to let the bar know that, hey, I actually know what I'm talking about. I recognize all these issues. I know the rules. I know how to apply it, but I just don't have time to lay it all out.
Did you answer like in a narrative way, or would you feel comfortable doing lists or even an outline? How did you approach that?
So the first time around was a nightmare. I honestly felt bad for the person or persons that were grading, my essays, because I felt like I went through as I identified the issues and reading. Well, first of all, you always read the call to the question, read what they're asking for, because
that's the bottom sentence of the essay.
Yeah,
it's in
right
bold.
At the bottom. It's in bold. That literally, I didn't even look at the rest of it until I read that and kind of made conscious, like, hey, this is what I need to look for when looking through these insane fact patterns. And after you do that, then it's a matter of, on the computer, with using the exam software and all of that, they have little notes sections and stuff like that. So you can kind of just bullet point really quick and say, this is what I need to look for. And then as you go through, just make quick notes as to, what you're identifying as far as these issues and how they're applying to the different areas. And then from there, I didn't really do it as much in a narrative format. The first year it was a garbled mess. It just was all over the place. This year I focused it more on each area. And from there, then I kind of went through, applied from the fact pattern, very quick, this is why this fact applies under this issue. This is the law. This is how the law would apply if the court were to look at it, or if it was the question of how would you advise the client or the potential consultation, put it in that perspective where I'm answering the question, because just bullet pointing and listing out the information, it may show that, hey, what the law is, or you might have memorized what the rule is or what the factors are because you have a good memory. That doesn't mean that you know how to actually apply it to what the actual question is asking or that particular fact pattern. And I think that is what gets you, and again, I have no idea because I'm not a grader. I don't know how it all works or what they're looking for exactly, but I think that gets you more points, when they're looking at it, because they're realizing, hey, it's not that he just is regurgitating what he memorized. It is that he actually understands the law and how it applies to the facts of the question that, they're asking you to answer. And if you can get that correct and you actually lay it out and show that you understand that, then I think that goes a long way. But you've got to do it in a concise manner so you can move on to the next one and actually touch base on all of them, so you can show that you've recognized all of these different issues. Because some of the questions, I had a bullet point for all these different issues. I think I had one that was probably over 10 of them, just different issues, and I was able to manage my time well enough where I was answering every single one. Sure, I may have missed a couple different areas, that they were looking for, but I think I did well enough. Well, clearly I did well enough to to be able to get enough in there, enough, of a response in there to be able to answer the questions the way that they were looking for.
And what materials did you use to help you do this data dump so you learned all this information?
So the typical, things that you're going to want to look for are the red books, from Cert Review. Those obviously are very helpful because they touch, on all the different areas. They give you a bunch of information. It is a little bit of an overload. So on those, I recommend only doing maybe like one topic at a time. Don't overdo it because it can be overwhelming.
Sure.
The last 2 years of cases, that is something that, obviously is kind of ingrained in you. They say focus on the last 2 years of cases and it's all fair game. The second time around, I had the benefit of having already studied the year prior. So, instead of the first time it was 2019 and 2020, the second time it was 2020 and 2021. So I had already literally read every single case and studied every single case from 2020 before. So I kind of had a head start in that respect,
Did you read all the case, like the full case out of the Florida Law Weeklies or the Green
I did.
Books?
So I used two materials for the cases. I got the Florida Law Weekly, some cases where they have literally every family law reported, opinion that family law cases come out in that given year. And then they have an option where you can get, I guess it's like a pre-order or an early bound release if you need it sooner, because it comes out in January and obviously they don't give you a lot of time to be able to order it and get it before, your exam in March. And so I ordered that pre-order option right away. They sent it in, a bound format, which was just fine. And then later on, they send you the actual green, hardbound book. So I have that obviously for the office, but, I used that and I read through every single case. That was fair game. Obviously, the dependency cases and adoption, those type of cases you can skip over. That was probably the best parts of studying and reading cases was when you flipped a page and you saw dependency, and I literally would just cross it out and I would flip the page, enjoy that I got to skip a page. But yeah, I read every single case and took some notes on them. And then as time got closer to the exam in terms of review and, recapping those cases, using the Squibs summaries and that book that I was able to get from you, I kind of went over and did a recap of those cases in those different areas for the last couple of years, and just help jog my memory on those cases. If it was something that I thought that was a novel case, that was a change in the law, that had happened in the last year, which there were
definitely going to show up on the test, right?
Oh yeah. So there were a couple of those big cases, especially in 2021. And so in looking through the summaries as I got closer to the exam, that was also a good time to say, this looks like one of those cases that's going to be tested. So I would go back to the Florida Law Weekly book and I would go ahead and I would, read through the case again, just to make sure I understood it, and had a good, understanding of what the court was basically saying, going forward, especially if it was a change, because a lot of us as practitioners, don't always stay up with the current case law, I've found, and or the rule changes, which I mean, you've got to do it. That's really what it boils down to at the end of the day, is what I've learned and what board certification and studying for that has taught me, and that you've got to stay on top of the rules and the cases because things change. I mean, even just during studying for the exam, I think the family law rules of procedure changed and updated like 3 or 4 times, with different updates. And I mean, even if they're minor updates, they're still changing. So
yeah, like getting that
that was
financial
another
affidavit
source.
in 2 days before the hearing. Now it's 5 days. I ran
Yep.
against an attorney that a board certified attorney that didn't even appreciate that change and zapped them. I mean, in my, how I study, I just read this stuff because I don't consider myself that smart, and by reading it and forcing myself to write it, it sticks in my head, and I'm always going to do that because I need to, because of my own learning issues. And even though I have a book, it's really, just a mechanism of me learning these cases. But it's cool to be able to share them. When you got that email, did you get an email, a phone call, or a letter letting you know you passed?
It was an email that came in, and it was in the form of a letter from the Florida bar, but it did come through by email, thankfully. So I wasn't
did you
having to
get
wait
it?
for the hard mail.
Did you get it before the deadline, or before you thought it was going to come to you?
So they told us this year that the results would be released no later than June 1st, and the email came in on May 31st.
Wow.
So it came in the day before the technical day that they said would be the last day that it would come out.
One of the best feelings in the world. I know you have 2 boys, but nothing compares to
Yeah,
that.
it was pretty exciting. I mean, I was joking with an attorney colleague of mine because I'm a guardian ad litem as well, and I'm a GAL on a case that she's one of the attorneys on. And I had a phone conference with her on that case. And as I was connecting to the phone conference, that email literally came in, and I was on the phone with her and with, yeah. And so I was on the phone with her because I was calling into the conference line because it was multiple and it was the parties and attorneys connected on it with myself. And so it was one of those, conference calls that you connect to. And so I was literally calling in as the email came in, and I'm on this conference call as a guardian ad litem, and it must have lasted almost an hour. It was probably like 50
Did you
minutes.
text your wife and like?
No, I did,
So
because
you held this in for an hour.
I was having to hold it in, and I got off the phone call because I obviously was wanting to stay professional while on the line as a guardian ad litem, and so I get off this call after like 50 minutes, and I sent that attorney a message, a text message. I'm like, you don't understand how hard it was to maintain my composure during that phone conference, because literally as I was logging into that phone conference, I got an email saying that I passed the board cert exam. And so it just, but yeah, it was a great feeling. And obviously, the rest of that day I was on cloud 9, knowing that, all the hard work and the time and the hours and sacrifice that was put into it, led to me passing it.
Well, that's really cool. And it is like an incredible achievement that should be celebrated. And I mean, the fact that you retook the test and buckled up, and this is a career changing moment for you that's gonna like put you in the upper echelon of all marital attorneys, like instantly, just by having those initials after your name. Having done it now twice, and knowing that board cert is supposed to be special and really represent the top of the best of the class, do you think it's a fair test?
I do think so. It's a very difficult test. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It is something that covers so many different areas, and obviously you don't know going in, what's going to be on it. The general, like you said, the bar, they give you, the topics, the subcore topics, all of that. They give you basically a little outline of what could be on it, and you look at it and you almost are kind of just in amazement, because it's literally every single possible area of family law that is potentially out there is on there, which, I could have told you that. I didn't need an outline saying, hey, here, start freaking out, because you need to know basically everything in this, because it's not just all the areas of family. It's the statutes, it's the family law rules of procedure, it's the judicial administration rules. I mean, it's pretty much everything that, you need to know as an attorney, but that most of us, for large part, don't necessarily memorize all of that information. If we need to figure something out, we look it up. That's what attorneys do. You pull up the rules, you look at the rule. If you need to look at case law, you look up case law. That's what we're trained as attorneys, I think, especially in law school, to do, is that, use your resources and look it up, so you can then know what you need to apply to that particular, set of facts. You don't get that luxury. It's not open book. It's not, you don't get to have, the rules or the statutes in front of you. And so you're studying it. Obviously I mentioned the red books from Cert Review are helpful. The Florida Law Weekly, cases for the last 2 years, like I said, the squib summaries was helpful. But also I went through and I studied all the rules of procedure, the family law rules of procedure, the the judicial administration rules, or the general practice and judicial administration rules.
See, no one even knows they changed the name of that chapter.
Exactly.
I'm so
But, you know,
proud of you.
board certification helps you with that because you stay on top of these rule changes, which, you know, again, you know, I think is something that has helped me become a better lawyer, and studying for and taking this board certification exam is I'm more, you know, focused on rule changes and new and recent case law, making sure that I'm actually reading and seeing everything that comes through so I can be a better attorney, you know, for my clients and actually know what I'm doing. I mean, because like you said, you know, there's some attorneys that, you know, they don't know that there's been rule changes. I still have attorneys that, you know, are going by the old 12.285 mandatory disclosure rules, which, you know, were modified well over a year ago. So, you know, it's good just knowing that information and looking and making sure you're staying on top of the law. But, you know, for instance, yesterday, Supreme Court released a new amendment going into effect July 1st, you know, to the notice of production from non-party subpoenas, you know, and they finally, I don't know why this wasn't done previously, but they finally changed it where if it's served by email, the objection deadline is not 15 days anymore. It's now 10 days. So again, that's something that a lot of attorneys don't stay on top of these things. I have it favorited and bookmarked where I periodically check in to see if there's rules updates, you know, new family law cases, stuff like that. And I like to, you know, actually look at them and read them. And so that was one that I saw come in yesterday. I mean, literally, it was dated June 16th and it goes into effect July 1st. So as of July 1st, for anyone out there, the new rule is that the objection deadline is 10 days if served by email, not 15 days. So, you know, those are just things that help you become a better practitioner in family law, better serve your clients, and also, you know, I mean, let's be honest, make you look good to the court at the end of the day. You know, if you know what you're talking about, you know, judges are going to respect you. And, you know, all we have in this profession is our reputation, in my opinion. And so, you know, if you know what you're doing, if, you know, you are a professional, if you understand, you know, the laws and the rules and the procedures, I think that goes a long way, you know, to helping you and your career, you know, moving forward.
Definitely agree with that. And even if you don't pass the test, I've never heard anyone say that, you know, it didn't make them a better attorney, just going through
Exactly.
the process. So
it certainly makes you a better attorney, you know, and I don't think it should be anything that if someone takes the exam, they should be discouraged if they don't pass it. You know, I'm not going to lie, I was bummed for a while, you know, after I, you know, got those results the first time, but it also motivated me because I realized I wasn't ready for it. I didn't take it. I didn't spend enough time, you know, studying. I didn't manage my time well during the exam. And on top of that, you know, you have to also kind of take into consideration what's going on in your personal and your professional life during those months leading up to the exam, and really make a decision consciously whether or not you are going to be able to have enough time to devote to studying for the exam. The first time around, I didn't. You know, everything was crazy. Work was crazy. You know, as much as COVID hurt a lot of businesses and people, you know, as I told everyone, it has been very helpful for family law attorneys. And my practice, you know, saw that, you know, and saw that, you know, increase in that time frame. And we were very, very busy. And that led to me not having as much time, probably because I was focusing on cases and my law firm and all of that. And the second time around, it was more planning better. And, you know, thankfully we had a new associate attorney at that point that started, you know, last year, who had helped with the firm. My wife, who is also my partner, and she is also one of the 275 board certified family law attorneys in the state of Florida. She was a great help as well. So she,
when did she pass?
She passed in 2019.
Cool. So that was the year before I
she
started interviewing him. I'm gonna have to set up an interview with her.
Yeah. So she's been board certified for a few years now, and you know, she was a great help, obviously, you know, helping with my cases and kind of jumping in as needed on the emergency, you know, situations that came up, and trying to deal with things so I didn't have to stress out and worry about it, and I could focus on studying.
Well, Andrew, any other tips you can think of that might benefit our listeners who are thinking of or planning to take this test?
Like I said, definitely study. I mean, don't discount the fact that this is not a lot of information. If you wait until it's too late, you're not going to be ready. It is a lot of information to understand, and so you've got to make sure that you're looking at all your sources, but also know yourself. Everyone is different in how they study. What I tell someone and how I study may not work for the next person. What you may tell someone may not work. There might be someone out there that only studied 50 hours and then they passed the exam. That may have worked for them, because everyone is different. One person may study, using flashcards. That may work for them. That's not the way I study. I didn't use flashcards. I didn't do outlines. I literally just read. I read and I read and I read. I read the books. I read the outlines. I read the cases. I read the statutes. I read the rules. I made my own notes and everything, just as little quick reminders on things that popped out or seemed important. But I largely just read. and so it's just a lot of personal, ways of doing things, that everyone, kind of does for themselves. I tend to learn things and memorize things by just kind of going over it and over and over in it and remembering it. And then time management. I mean, I keep going back to that because it is not enough time. I'm just honest about that. And it was both years. I mean, even this year as well, it wasn't enough time, but I already knew that going into it. So that helped me plan a little bit better so I can formulate better responses on the essays, because multiple choice, it is what it is. Those, you go through, you get them, you're right or you're wrong, but you go through and you get them done. The short, answer, I will say on those, don't spend too much time. That was another thing that I did incorrectly the first year, is I went down the rabbit hole of
they're just looking for 1 point on those short
exactly.
answers.
And I mistakenly made that problem an issue. The first time I took it, is that I would answer, because they require you to say yes or no, and then give your brief answer to that question. Well, on a couple of them, I don't know if maybe I just felt like, because I knew the answer, I realized I typed way too much. I'm like, I spent way too much time on that one question, which took away from being able to answer an essay question, later on. And so focus on limiting the amount of time that you spend on those short answer, questions. They're not looking for a long response. It's just make sure that you understand like why the answer is what it is. And then using as much of that time on the essays as possible so you can formulate your thoughts and try to make it, organized enough that it makes sense and you're actually applying the different laws to the facts and the issues and showing them that you actually know what you're talking about. Because I think the more information you can get and the more analysis that you can put on there to show them that you understand what the laws and the rules are and how they apply goes a long way, not just regurgitating, statutes or rules or, anything like that. So time management is crucial, and, just stay focused and try not to let all the outside stressors come in. I know that's very difficult, especially nowadays, but, having, work support, having family support, friend support, that's a game changer, I think, for a lot of people as well, because I wouldn't have been able to do it if I didn't have the support of, my family and my colleagues at the office as well, because life is busy and stressful. And if you've got kids and you've got your own practice, or even if you're just an associate, if you got billable requirements, whatever it may be, I mean, it's a lot to take on to be able to set aside the amount of time that you need to focus and study for this exam. And it is a hard exam. It's a fair exam. I think that is why there are, only, I think it's 275 attorneys now in the entire state of Florida that are board certified in marital and family law.
Two are in your house.
and two of them right here. But yeah, I think that's part of the reason why it is such an achievement for family law attorneys. And if you are serious about it, take the opportunity, go ahead and do it, because if anything, it is going to make you a better attorney and a better practitioner.
Agreed. Andrew, thank you so much for your time. The reason we've interviewed everybody in the past 2 years the Florida Bar has passed, and hearing the different approaches, I think is really helpful. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. Good luck in congratulations on this epic achievement.
Thanks, Eddie. I appreciate it very much.
Welcome to another board cert tip of the month. And with me, Andrew Redder from Sesame's Black.
Hey, Eddie, how
Andrew,
are
you
you
with
today?
us? Congratulations, my friend, on being one of the 6 attorneys who passed the board cert test in 2022. Yay!
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So only 6 people passed and 3 of them were named Andrew. So I think that tells you a name change may be in order. What did you think of this massive epic exam, Andrew?
It was a huge undertaking. One piece of advice that I would give just at the very outset for anybody that's going to be taking the exam would be to start studying early. It's the whole process can seem and feel very overwhelming. There's a lot of material, a lot of potential issues that could be covered. So, a lot of family and friends asked me once I got my results, how are you feeling? What are you feeling? And the one word that I just kept coming back to was relief. It just felt
Relieved.
so good to be done with the process and done with the test, and knowing that I won't have to sit for that exam again.
Yeah, when I passed it, it was like the last exam I ever had to take. So and true to my word. But it is hard, and studying takes on a different form for everybody. It's a massive amount of information you got to plug into your brain. They give you the core and subcore, and really everything within that is tested. So how did you go about learning all of that data and getting it in your head?
So I think that the first place that I started, and what I would recommend to folks taking the exam, is to start with the Florida Law Weeklies from the year that you're going to take the test, and just start going back into prior years. But I think that recent Florida appellate family law decisions are the best place to start, just because those are issues where new case law is coming out or the law may be changing, but also because as you're reviewing that case law, it's a good refresher as to prior decisions that have come out. So, given, as you said, just the sheer volume of material that's on the exam, I personally think the best place to start is with Florida Law Weekly opinions, and of course the red books from Cert Review. Definitely give those a plug.
And do you read Florida Law Weekly every week, or did you just tackle the material?
So I try to read them every single week, especially in, I would say, the 6 to 9 months before the exam started. I became much more consistent with reading them each and every Friday. But I think it's important to not only read the new cases that are coming out, but then to go back and catch up on the prior, probably at least 2 to 3 years of Florida Law Weeklies that have come out.
Besides the red books that you mentioned and the weeklies, what other resources would you use?
Well, I think it's important to kind of focus on subjects and topics that you've either heard from people that have taken the test that are heavily tested, such as there's going to be certain things in child support or military pensions, or just topics that we don't necessarily deal with every single day in our practice, but they're issues out there. They're covered at Cert Review. We see them from time to time in the Florida Law Weekly summaries, and it just seems like there are certain topics that they're always going to find a way to test on. They may change the questions, they're going to change the fact patterns, they may do it the opposite question that they had done 2 or 3 years before, but there's just some major subjects that are very likely going to be on the exam, and I think it's important to focus on those. Whereas, there's going to be smaller issues that, yes, it's in the red book. Yes, it's part of our practice, but are they really going to use valuable testing space on an issue that never really comes up or may come up in our practice once every decade or more? So, I think that trying to figure out what the most heavily tested subjects and topics are, and really focusing on those.
I know board cert is really important to the firm you belong to. How were your partners able to help you through this process?
Well, as you said, it was definitely important to my partners. And from the moment I joined the firm 7 years ago, they definitely set out the expectation that I would become board certified at some point. So that's helped me insofar as, I was trying to be cognizant over the last couple years to, as I'm in my practice, to continue to learn this stuff as you go along. I practice 100% family law, so I'm doing this day in and day out anyway. And my partners were extremely helpful, just because Alex, he's gone through this process before. He's board certified. Caroline, she is board certified, and they were able to provide just some general testing tips, as well as just to share some thoughts on the process and areas that Caroline and Alex thought may be covered on the exam, and just like I said, just some general testing strategies. But they definitely put an expectation early on that board certification was important, and something that I should work to achieve.
Yeah, if you're doing something for a living, why wouldn't you want to be the best at it?
Absolutely.
Seems pretty simple.
Absolutely.
So did you have like a study buddy, or did you team up with anyone?
So I did not have a study buddy. About a year or two ago, I was in a study group and spent a couple years in a study group that's since dissolved. But the materials that I mainly focused on were, and we've already spoken about two of them, the Florida Law Weekly Summaries was number one, the Red Books from Cert Review, and then also just reviewing the Florida family law rules, as well as the main statutes that we encounter fairly common: 6130, 6108, the equitable distribution statute, 61075. I think that those are like the main. If you were somebody that you only had time to look at a few different categories of materials, I would say definitely the Florida Law Weekly Summaries, the Red Books, as well as the rules and the main statutes that we encounter.
And did you keep track of how much time you spent studying?
I started to. I stopped keeping track at some point, just because it was so much time, and I just felt so overwhelmed with not only studying for the exam, young children at home, also maintaining a busy law practice, that even the thought of I'm spending time to enter time that's non-billable, I just stopped tracking it at some point. But it's an immense amount of hours that goes into it. I would suggest, coming up with a very specific study schedule and calendar that you stick to. Everybody has our own strengths and weaknesses, whether you're somebody that, works better in the morning, works better at night. We all have different schedules and calendars. Me personally, I'm sharpest in the morning. So one thing that I tried to do was get to my office even earlier in the morning and spend the first 2 to 3 hours of every workday just studying for board cert. And I probably did that for a few months before the exam. That would then allow me to have, a fairly standard workday after that, shortened by a couple hours, but still get in a full workday. And then oftentimes after the kids went down to sleep, there'd be another hour and a half, 2 hours, during the week. And then also trying to find some time on the weekend. But it is definitely a test that takes a significant amount of commitment, and if you can't put in the time, energy, and effort to study and really prepare, then you may just be wasting time taking it, and you may want to reconsider when you're able to devote more time. Because personally, I do not think, even for practitioners that practice family law, day in and day out, I think that this exam is so difficult that if you do not study and devote a significant time and energy in preparing for it, I think that there's a very good chance that you're not going to pass the exam, even if you practice family law on a daily basis. It's just a very technical, very specific exam.
And you have to know everything at once. Literally, you have to know everything at once. The exam has gotten a lot of criticism because the passage rate is so low, and this year 6 out of 20 something passed, which would be about a quarter. Now that you are board certified, do you think the process of vetting these attorneys is fair?
I can't really speak to either that process of what goes on between submitting that application and then the 6, 7, 8, 9 months that goes by between you even figuring out whether you're going to be able to sit for the exam or not. I know that we submit references for a peer review process and submit judicial reviews. What goes into that, or how that looks, or what they're looking for, or what qualifies you or disqualifies you is not something that I really know. I'd be curious to kind of see the number that applied to take the exam versus, actually became eligible to sit and take it, to see if there was a big drop off there or not.
I don't think they released that.
Yeah, I don't know if they're ever going to give us that information or not, but so I can't really speak to whether the process is fair in terms of vetting, and even the passage rate. Just simply saying a percentage that 10% passed or 25% passed or 50% passed. Without knowing more about the time and energy that those folks put in, without knowing more about how the exam is put together, what they're looking for, I don't know that I'm really in a good position to say that the passage rate is too high or too low.
And now that you have passed, is there any tips that you could give our listeners that may be thinking about or about to take this exam?
Start early. Do not wait. Do not delay. Do not think that this is something that you can study for 30 or 60 days and pass the exam. I know from talking with people that took the exam in prior years, as well as somebody that took it and passed with me in this cycle, they spent months preparing for the exam and devoting a significant amount of time into it. It is a tremendous professional accomplishment, but it's certainly not easy, and a lot of work and time and energy and sacrifice goes into it. So just a single biggest piece of advice that I would give to anybody considering taking the exam is to start early and to start preparing as soon as possible. That's for the exam, but I do actually have one more tip too about the application, and that's the actual board certification application is like 45 to 50 pages long. And I would say that it probably took me 2 to 3 full business days to complete my application. And that's even with, over the last couple of years, tracking my cases and trying to get, ready for the application process. One thing that I did was really track my trials, and I was very on top of the 7, 8, 9 cases, the trial cases that, you have to have.
The B1s.
I'm sorry?
The B1s on the app.
Correct. Those B1s are ones that I really did not. I spent less time on the front end considering, but took a lot more time in preparing the exam, preparing the application, was these B cases that didn't go to trial, but they still want to see substantial involvement. That was something that I did not do a good job tracking on the front end. And it necessitated hours worth of work going back through some of these cases that are now 3 or 4 years old to figure out, what discovery did I do in that case? Did I take a deposition? Did I send additional interrogatories? Was there a request for production that was more than just the standard request? So in the application process is something that I think people also should not underestimate. If you see that deadline, and I don't know what it is in 2022, but last year the deadline was August 31st, 2021. That was something that, like I said, took me days to complete. And I would definitely start that application as soon as possible, and at least 2 to 3 weeks before the deadline.
Well, keep in mind, every 5 years you recertify and have to provide the same information. So keep your app handy. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for spending time with us today and giving us your insight, and congratulations on this epic achievement. You're in a very special group of, not too many people do this within their first decade of practicing. So kudos to you. That just shows you're a superstar, and we look forward to see what you do with it.
Thank you, Eddie. I appreciate that very much.
Andrew, it was a pleasure talking to you. And hello, we have one more board certification tip of the month. We have with us board certified attorney, Chris Rumbold. Chris, congratulations on being one of the 6 people that passed the 22 board cert exam.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
So we love to pick your head on pick your brain, and we will try not to get too dirty.
Sure.
And we love to hear like how you approach the exam, and now that you've passed it. Only 6 people out of 20 something passed it, and there's a lot of criticism that the tests may be too hard. Now that you're on the side of passing it, do you think that the test is fair and representative of what a board certified attorney should know? Or do you agree with the criticism that it's just too crazy hard and designed to make people fail?
No, I don't think it's too hard and designed to make people fail. I did take it twice. So I took it last year as well. I think one of the difficulties with the exam, at least for me, is you do all that studying up to taking the exam and you've got all this great information in your head. And then you have a very limited amount of time to actually be able to translate that into the written word. So when I took it last year, so the structure of the exam, I'm sure everybody knows, is multiple choice essay, multiple choice essay, short answer essay, and then 2 essays. So I did fine on the first, second, and fourth sections, but on the third section, I had real problems with time management. So I wrote 1 sentence for the essay question, and that obviously was not sufficient. So when I took it the second time, I spent much less time on the short answer, and it was tough to get it done in time, but I did get it finished in time. And I think that probably made all the difference.
I think everyone we talk to has issues with the timing, even if they're, fast test takers. I think most people will run out of time, especially with the big essays, and that freaks you out.
Yeah, so the second time I took it, I finished all sections on time, but I was much more cognizant of my time management the second time. I think it was also probably super helpful that I reviewed my exam from the first time with Julia Wida, and we spent quite a bit of time going through it, reviewing all of my answers, looking at the way in which the question translated or didn't translate to the answer that I had. And I think that was super helpful as well. I just felt like in a much different place the second time I took it.
And when you reviewed the exam, could you see why you didn't pass the first time around? Was it obvious? Or
so yes. So the short answer, you have all this, or at least you have all this information in your head, right? And you want to get it down on the paper. So short answer means 2 sentences. It does not mean like 3 enormous paragraphs, which was why I ended up having the time to write 1 sentence on the essay that went with the short answer. So the second time I took it, it was 2 sentences max, 2 minutes per short answer question max. And then I had plenty of time to do the essay question that was associated with it.
So just pure budgeting and being familiar with the format from the year before.
Yeah. And so I went to the tips and nibbles and I heard them say short answer. I just didn't really know what that meant until I went back through and reviewed the exam.
Yeah, they're not looking for you to show how smart you are. They just want same thing with essays. When I graded the test, I didn't like narrative answers. I was fine with a bulleted answer,
Yeah,
as long as it conveyed the information. So, but I took the test back when you had the option to use Blue Book. So I actually hand wrote my test. For your past year's test, did you take it remotely where they were
yes,
observing
yeah,
you in the
both
fishbowl?
times I took it remotely.
All right.
Um,
Would you do
and
that
that was
again
okay.
if you had the option, or would you do it live?
I think I probably would have been more comfortable live. I mean, I took the bar exam on, I think the last year it was offered written. And so, yeah, like blue books, I'm all about filling them out, handwriting out my answers. So it was a bit of a learning curve. And, you know, I had taken the exam the year before, but I had forgotten, you know, just what I needed to do in order to get to the part where I could actually start answering the first question. But I don't know. I mean, I think it was fine.
So they tell you the areas, the
Yes.
core and subcore. So there's really no surprises. Everything within those things are probably going to be tested.
Right.
Once they give you the areas that they're testing on, what did you do to memorize or learn or master that material?
So having taken it before, I had an idea about how much time I wanted to set aside. So I set aside between January 1st and the exam 300 hours. And I reviewed the green books. I went through all of the opinions for the last 4 years. I went through all of those 3 times. I went through all of the rules, highlighted, tabbed, all of the statutes highlighted and tabbed. And then when it came down to the last week or 2 before the exam, I busted out the red books and went through them. I know a lot of people do outlines. I'm not a fan of outlines. I do much better with a highlighter in my hand and just reading. So that was what I did. The year before, I spent about 100 hours, and I knew that wasn't enough when I was taking the exam.
So after you had 300 hours in your belt and you're going to sit down for the exam, did you feel comfortable you were going to be one of the 6, or one of the few that passed it?
No, not at all. I felt like I had much more mastery of the topics, a much better understanding of how the test takers wanted me to present the information that I knew. But if I had been asked different essay questions, I mean, maybe I wouldn't have passed. I don't know.
I briefed a Supreme Court issue to the Supreme Court that was on my test. So that's how I brag that I passed mine, because I had the privilege of really knowing one of the essay questions.
Yeah.
Way back when. So a little bit of skill, a little bit of luck, right place, right time. How'd you feel when,
think that is part of it.
How'd you feel when you got that email?
Really, really good. Although I have to say that I traditionally put a lot of pressure on myself. I am unfortunately a perfectionist, and I feel like the bar has been raised. If I would have normally spent an hour on a motion, it's now 2 hours. I want to make sure that all of the case law is in there, all of the rules are in there, everything that I know is in there. I certainly think that having that badge has caused me to be a more thoroughly researched lawyer. And I do think like it's changed my practice a little bit, at least in the manner in which I think it is acceptable for me to be prepared for a hearing. Like I do enjoy being the most prepared person in the courtroom, but now it's like exponential.
You have a whole new standard to hold yourself
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. I mean, that's a much better way of saying it than I said it. But yeah, I am holding myself to a higher standard.
So I know you're very involved with the family law section. Would you ever consider being on the board cert committee, which is a Florida bar committee?
If somebody asked me,
I think
yeah,
you do one of those committee preference forms, just like in the section I have them for the Florida bar.
Let me
and,
say it in another way. If somebody wanted me, yeah,
it's a fun committee. It's a hard committee. It
Yeah,
requires
I mean-
a whole lot of work, but
right now I'm treasurer, so I've got a couple years in the
Oh, you
family
gotta
law
pass.
section to,
they got you busy for at least 6 years.
yeah. But you know, I did think that it would be really fascinating to grade the exams. Just
That's the
because
smartest I've ever been was when I was on the board cert committee, not
I'm
studying for the
sure,
test.
I'm sure, you know, and it's funny now because like I'm sure 20 years ago when I took the bar exam, I had these same thoughts, right? So like after the first time I took the exam, every single case I read, I was like, this is what they're going to ask me. This is going to be the issue. I know they're going to test on this. And I had all these furious case notes everywhere. And now it's kind of similar, right? So I keep thinking if I was grading the exam, I would ask about this case or this issue. And every time I see a quick rule change, like we recently had rule changes, I'm like, I know they're testing on that.
They usually
Yeah.
do. They usually do these weird little changes in the law. And if you read Florida Law Weekly every week, you notice those pattern changes.
Right.
And,
Right.
those are usually the things that end up on the test.
Yeah.
Any
Yeah,
other?
no, it's good stuff. I mean, you know, professionally, I haven't really seen a change, but it's been what, like a month and a half?
Well, I saw your website's changed. It looks really
Yes,
nice.
but that's kind of the extent of it. You know, and my letterhead changed too. But I mean, other than that, no. And you know, I'm hopeful that with this distinction, you know, I really enjoy speaking in public. I really enjoy writing. I feel like this is going to be a catalyst to more of that, or at least I hope it will be.
Yeah, I was very lucky. I was a baby lawyer. So like when I passed, no one knew me, but as soon as I passed, you know, they knew that I had a skill set. So
Yeah.
I didn't have that little freshman surprise you with everybody. But you took it after 20 years. Did that scare you that, you know, that part in your career, doing such a challenging thing? I mean,
yeah. So, you know, family law section service for me, it didn't really start until I had moved to Gladstone and Weissman, which is probably a decade ago now. And then after I left and established my own firm, it took a while to get the trial credits. And I had qualified to sit for the exam, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, but I just didn't have the time with opening a new practice. And now I think maybe I would have had the time if I had prioritized it. Because as a sole practitioner, I somehow managed to find those golden 300 hours to study. I mean, in the back of my head, it's like, dude, you're in your 40s. Can you really sit for an exam like this? And I did, and I passed. So I guess that's good.
Well, I think there are people out there that don't take it just because they've been out there a while and they don't, you know, they know the passage rate is so low and they're unwilling to deal with that potential failure. And it takes a whole lot of courage to face that. And I can't even imagine what you're feeling now that you've passed it. So kudos.
What I'm feeling is, what's the next exam I'm going to take?
I hope never to take an exam again.
well, I'd like to become a member of the academy. So you know, that's going to be an exam, and I've already started my application for that. I just have to finish it. So we'll see.
Any other tips, Chris, that you could give our listeners that are interested in taking and sitting for this incredible epic exam?
Yeah, just like give yourself a break. Be in a position where you know you can set aside the time. And if you miss a day, you pick up the next day. You know, I really had to be kind to myself during this. It took me away from my business, my dogs, my husband, you know, and it required a real commitment. But I'm in such a different place now, just with confidence that passing gave me. And I think even if I hadn't passed, just the sheer breadth of knowledge that I had to quasi commit to memory. Let's remember, I'm in my 40s. My memory is not what it used to be. But like it's just such a great experience. And I felt this way after the last time I took it. I was like, this is a fantastic experience. Everybody should, if you're willing to try, you should really try.
Yeah, why not be a master at what you do?
Yeah, exactly.
Simple. Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time, your tips.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate the offer, Eddie.
Well, we appreciate you. And if we can ever return the favor, we'd be happy to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I really appreciate it.
Good afternoon, and we are back for our board certification tip of the month. And with us, newly board certified attorney, Andy Wilson. Andy, how you doing?
I'm great. I'm now an expert, I guess.
You are, and believe it or not, your ability to be sued for malpractice just became a whole lot easier. So congratulations with
Yes,
that.
I need to call some people about that.
And you're held to a higher standard, as you should be. So congratulations. I know you're with Young, Berman, Karp & Karp down in Miami, a great law firm. And you have been an attorney, what, 10,
12.
11, 12 years now.
12 years.
And you're from the University of Miami.
Just for law school.
Where'd you go to undergrad?
I went to Emory in Atlanta.
Oh, so very, very, that explains why you passed. So. What did you think of the test, the board cert test?
So I thought it was a bit of a doozy. I had done all of the practice questions that the committee releases that are on the website, I don't know, more times than I can count. And so I knew going into it that it was going to be multi-issue spotting on the essays. And I knew that some of the multiple choice were going to be a little bit out there. I thought that the multiple choice went fairly well and it got to the short answers. And I thought those were really challenging. And I remember being concerned because, you know, they record, the way that I did it was recorded because you can type on your computer, it was recorded from home. And so they monitor your face, they monitor your movements. So you're not talking, they look in the background, scientific stuff that I don't really understand. But I remember looking at several questions and mouthing like, what the? Because I wouldn't have known how to say yes, to say no, to say maybe. If a judge asked me, I would have like looked for help. So it was a fair test, I would say, but it certainly was broad in scope and specific in detail.
So you got to know everything they tell you to study, right?
You got to know more than that. And when they tell you, you know, read all the rules and, you know, you as a practitioner and me as a practitioner, you know, oh, okay, interrogatories 30 days, that's a throwaway. Well, not how they test you, you know, it's going to be a nuance of service within that. And that's not every question. Not every question is a gotcha in a way, but it wasn't just, hey, I'm good. I've litigated for 12 years heavily. I know all of these procedures off the top of my head. It didn't go that way. They didn't test it that way, I should say.
You got to know the stuff, but they tell you the core and subcore. So you know the subjects that are going to be tested. And I think it's fair to say that everything in there, you know, if a statute has a list of factors, you're going to need to not only know and apply those factors, but anything that comes out new, you know, in that year or the year before is usually tested on. So how did you go about the whole studying process, if I can ask?
Yeah, so I started the process at tips and nibbles and tips,
So
whatever that's called.
January.
Well, I started with a panic attack when I sat in that room and there were people who had just passed the year before and were saying that they had started 6 months prior, or this person said that they'd rented a house near Tampa because that's where the test was for 2 weeks and did nothing but study. There were people who said, who had taken it multiple times, were like, I would be driving in my car and repeating things out loud and testing myself. And I'm like, I have how many trials before March? I have these evidentiary hearings and I got to catch up to all of you. And so that was when I had a mini meltdown. And then I talked to the partners that I work with, and then I started getting my act together. And it started with heavily outlining everything that was spoken about in the Orlando CERT review seminar. Then it was outlining the books. And I mean, do you want me to continue with all the studying?
Yeah, tell me all the materials. We're giving
So-
tips to what people should be looking at to master this stuff.
Sure. So let's see. So I started with the general concepts. So like, I think that many of us who do, let's say, family litigation, as opposed to, let's say, domestic violence, you're pretty good with equitable distribution, you know quite a bit about alimony and the different factors and stuff that go into those. So as I would be more comfortable with a topic area like that, I started outlining that first so that I would know that I am getting in the depth level with that before I would move on to something very specific, because I know if I had to start reading, let's say, military, which I don't think I've ever done a military divorce, I knew I'd get overwhelmed and I'd get a little intimidated because there's just a whole lot of knowledge there that I'd never used, and I couldn't rely on, oh, remember when I was in the so-and-so case and we did that, So I charted out on a calendar, today I'm going to do this. And I kept, I work at a fairly large law firm, for at least family law. And so I kept my schedule fairly the same in terms of work, but then I made sure that every day there were a couple hours where I was either copying down notes from the red books that were given out at CERT review, or I was then starting to memorize things. One of the tips I was given in Tips and Nibbles was study how you used to study, and I am a memorizer. So I downloaded an app and I started making flashcards, even from the most basic, like what's the standard for alimony? Need an ability to pay. Okay, I'm never going to forget that one, but I threw it in there. And so I started, I think by the end, I probably had 900 flashcards saved in every single topic that the committee says is going to be tested. And I would go through those, and the way that the app worked is if you got one right, then it didn't show it to you for a while, but if you got one wrong, it would come up more frequently. And so, for example, when you have to memorize, I mean, I wouldn't say you have to, but you probably should, all 9, because I still have the, what's the thing called?
Onomatopoeia, where you...
Yeah, whatever those things are. Anagram, and now whatever it is. But
Right.
the alimony is the die factors. DIE, FACTRS, that's every factor for alimony. So I would put those in there. And I would say, all right, what are all of them? Then I would do, what's the D in die factors? What's the O in die factors? So that I was really hammering those in. And then as it got closer to the test and I was getting more of those questions right, I had reached out to my family law professor, Kira Willig from back at UM, and I asked her to send me some of the exams from her class so that I could go over these multi-issue spotting questions and at least try to pull those out, because I knew that's where, I mean, they told us that's where the bulk of the points are going to be. And so I was doing that. And then the last 2 weeks before the test, I basically took off work. I mean, I was there, I was monitoring emails, but I cleared all the calendars off of my schedule. I was delegating everything out. I would say, don't talk to me. I was studying on the weekends. Even before that, I was studying on the weekends. And then somehow I took the test and I passed.
So between January and March, it's doable.
It is doable. I did it. And I worked the whole time too. Now I maybe only billed, let's say 100 hours in February and, probably 20 in the first part of March, but I was lucky to have the support of my firm to be able to do that, because it was an expectation, almost a requirement, that I pass this test. And I wouldn't be able to further my career within the firm, or of course outside of the firm, which I have no desire to leave. I'm very happy where I am. I love the team that we're at. But even if I wanted to go somewhere, I needed this accreditation in order to really sell myself as the top tier family law, like you are, and the rest of the people who are board certified.
So how'd you find out that you passed? Was it the email or a phone call?
So I got the email. And I can tell you another story off camera about it, but I got the email and I basically, oh my God, it happened. And I happened to be out on vacation at my parents' house. So then my mom came in, and then I got to call the partners, and a dear friend of mine who had helped with who's board certified. Her name is Laura Davis Smith. You probably know her. So I called her because she was a big support to me. And so my mom got to see all of that fun news, which, you know, that made her week.
Laura Davis gives the best hugs in the world.
She is a fantastic person and an even better lawyer.
Yes. So do you think that now that this has changed your trajectory, you already mentioned it was like an expectation of the firm. How do you feel?
I didn't think I would be as proud of this achievement as I am. You know, I think a lot of lawyers work hard, but you know, you have to be of a certain intelligence level and a certain skill level to even get into this profession and succeed, to even be qualified to take this test. And so I wouldn't say that in, you know, let's say getting into law school, I wouldn't say that was the hardest thing I've ever done. I didn't think college was all that difficult. Law school went pretty fine. I could have worked harder, but I certainly did okay. This I really dedicated myself to. I really took it seriously. And, you know, I had a team that helped me and I had support, but I did it. I studied it, I memorized it, and I wrote it, and I did it. And so I actually was on a phone call this week, and an attorney was trying to give me advice, and they were just wrong about the law. And so I kind of said, like, look, you know, I studied this recently because I just became board certified, so I know. And this lawyer was not, and they erupted on me. And hearing them talk about, oh, you must just be good at taking tests. What does this little piece of paper mean? It stung. And I was like, boy, you are ignorant at what really goes on in this and what this means in your career. And that, in a way, almost made me even prouder of myself, because I was able to hold myself out to the ethical standard that we have, try to help somebody, and it just felt good to be right.
Well, even if you don't pass, you probably are the smartest you ever are the year you study for the exam, just because you're taking it all in. And even if you don't pass, you know, there's still some merit putting yourself through this process, because it, no matter what, will make you a better attorney one way or the other, a better divorce attorney.
You are absolutely right. And, you know, it's kind of funny because when you do sort of the same things in litigation kind of day in and day out, motion to compel, we need temporary support, we need to compel that, you know, a little bit of it gets rote. And so you get comfortable in what you know. And when you have to start expanding your mind in the studying process, it really is so valuable. And so even just as a practice, you know, I'm going to go back to my flashcard app that I had on my phone and on my iPad. I'm going to go back to that, you know, next year, or when I have a huge trial coming up and I got to refresh my evidentiary rules, and go back to that, because there was a lot I didn't know. I thought I knew a good amount, but there is a whole lot more.
I still have my outline, but it was from 2004, and that's like back when we had special equity and all this crazy stuff. So it's not as helpful as your flashcards, because you'll see the law does change. Almost changed significantly this year, but not. So do you know how many hours between January and March that you actually put into this? Can you quantify that?
I can quantify it with an approximate of probably between 150 and 200. I would say by the last couple of weeks before the test, I was doing probably a solid 6 hours during the workday of either reviewing flashcards, going over materials, taking practice exams, or at least just issue spotting them. And then that would be during the week. And then on the weekends, I tried to take Sundays off entirely. I needed that break to watch trash TV and clear my mind. But Saturdays, I would still spend probably from the morning until early afternoon focused on all of that. And then, you know, let myself have a Saturday night so I could at least not, you know, drive myself insane staring at the walls of my apartment.
Any interest in serving on the board cert committee now that you passed?
It's something I would consider. I need to reach out, actually. I'd love to go and sit in the test and nibble, whatever, the thing that starts it off. I'd love to be able to offer my advice there, because it was really an effective presentation, but I didn't hear a lot of people like me who hadn't really given studying much thought until we sat in that room. And while I don't think everybody can especially solos or people who, aren't working on very high profile cases where you're going to get paid. It's really hard to take all the time away from your practice. And so, so I just want to kind of share that with them and how, I think I could make that work for other people as well. If you just schedule and plan quite a bit in advance.
So you don't have to lock yourself in a wood cabin for 2 months.
I think that would have been crazy for me. Everybody's got to do what they want. Some people, can study at a Starbucks. I couldn't go to a Starbucks and not like be distracted by everything, So you really do have to do whatever works for you effectively or has worked for you in the past.
I was more of a writer down than flashcards, and just by the process of writing it out, usually stuck in my head. But we're all different learners, and I think you have to know what's best, how you retain this information. And there's such a low passage rate. I think only 5 people passed this year.
It was 5 out of 24, and 3 of them were named Andrew. So any
So-
Andrews out there, you got a leg up.
We do have 3 Andrews. I have the benefit of interviewing all of you this year, which is really cool. Do you think that that's like a fair representation? Like only 5 out of the 24 pass it? Like,
I'd love to know well, I say that, but I don't know if I mean it. I would love to know where I fell in that, from 1 to 20. Well, I guess it was only 1 to 5, but I would still love to know where that spread was. And within those of us who passed, how much of it was curved? Did I only get 50% of the questions right? Or did I get 80% of the questions right? That kind of a thing. But that's really just more for ego than it is for anything else. In terms of whether, I don't know if you're exactly asking, should it be more people or less people who pass?
well, do you think it's representative of who should be board certified? Let me ask it that way.
I think in order to pass this test, you have to show the breadth and depth of knowledge to be considered an expert. I don't think you can wing it. I don't think I could have done 10 minutes less of studying than I did. I'm probably the guy who got 5th. I mean, it is consuming how much you need to know. And there are things that I left the test and I felt that there were several questions, and I'm talking the essays, which have the most points, where I felt like I got this. They're going to look at that as a model answer because I type really quickly and I knew the material and I felt really good. And then as my, days went on, I would be like, crap, why didn't I bring up unequal distribution? I mean, I don't know if that's really something, but like, let's say that's the example. And then I'm like, crap, everybody else would have known that one. I'm now down on the list. I'm going to have to do this again next year.
Well, taking it at home in front of your computer is a lot different than going to the hotel or convention center where during lunch you all talk about the first half and it freaks you out and usually distracts you for the second half. So a good tip is if you're doing it live, the test, as opposed to home at your computer, don't talk to anyone about the test at lunch. And if you're studying at that point, it's just useless. You're just just relax and get ready for the next session. Did you run out of time?
So I have always been a very fast test taker, whether that's gotten me the results I want in the past or not. My whole life, I've always been one of the first ones finished. And this test was not like that. And I can type 120 words a minute. I am fast. And so even with that, I would find myself, I've got 30 seconds left and I could keep going on some of those essay questions. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm giving you every brilliant legal analysis or finding every single issue or pivotal fact within those. I could just be vomiting things at that point. I don't know, but it worked.
And it's funny, when you pass, you don't really care about looking at your tests as much as if you didn't. And there's a review process if you don't pass, and you can take a look at the test. You can even appeal, and usually a couple people overturn the cert committee's decision. So those are always options. Thankfully, you don't have to worry about any of those, Andy, because you got that email that gave you the warm and fuzzies.
Exactly. Yes, I feel very lucky, and I still kind of want to know where I fell in that rank, though.
Sometimes it's better not to.
You're right. I mean, I'm the 5th place person this year. You know what? You still walked away with the thing.
Yes, and you get the initials and the honor and the prestige and all of the fun stuff that comes with that. So if you had one tip you could give our listeners who are thinking about or studying to take the test right now, what would you tell them?
So the first, this may be a multi-part answer. So the first is that it is absolutely worthwhile. It isn't worth, I mean, I can't speak to somebody who hasn't passed. You know, I got lucky and I passed it the first time, but the experience of studying absolutely made me a smart lawyer. Even if you are unable to take the test, even if you aren't able to get there, sure, it's an immense amount of time that you really do need to dedicate it. I don't know how you could do this and let's say bill a full 152 hours a month plus study. I don't know that that would be possible. I mean, unless you're a genius, but it makes you such a smarter lawyer. It makes you more confident. It, you know, it stops those gaps when you're in court, like, what's the right response to this? Or is that motion really the way to go? Or how do I angle this discovery? It just makes you feel like you really do know what you're doing. So my tip would be do this. Even if you don't get it the first time, the investment is worth it. And even if you have to take it again, now that you've gone through it, it's got to be easier. That's what the people that were in the nibbles and tips or whatever, those who had taken it more than once were saying, you know, it wasn't as challenging to study for the second time because I knew now what it looked like. I'd been through it. I knew how to memorize all of those things, and it worked. I guess that's my tip, my encouragement tip, my tip for actually taking the test. I couldn't have done it without memorizing. And I think some of the stuff is just rote memorization. So for example, mnemonics, that's the word we're missing, mnemonics. So all the mnemonics for like the 29 billion factors for time sharing and parenting plans or for relocation, keep writing them down and get them in there and get them in your brain. And, you know, that kind of helps you if you're doing a depot prep and you're like, all right, I got to go through the die factors now. Oh, I forgot to do tax treat, you know, like, it really does just make you a better lawyer. You are dangerous when you are studying and after that test as well, especially if you keep it up.
It certainly gave me a lot more confidence, just having the knowledge base and so many tools to use in our profession, I guess. Andy, if there's anything that you would have done different, what would that be?
Sure. So a couple of things. So the first thing I would have done is I really would have read through the rules of procedure. I kind of ignored them because I thought I knew all of them, and or at least I knew enough to fake it a little bit. And the procedural questions on there were detailed, and I really should have spent the time on that because I bet that would have been a couple of more points, even though that's not the bulk of them. I think that would have helped. The other thing that I would have done differently is on some of the smaller topics, at least they say that they're smaller topics, things like military, quadro, tax issues that aren't like the big ticket items like parenting plans or alimony or child support or jurisdiction. I would have spent a little bit more time on those as opposed to just like, okay, I've read it, I hope it sticks. I would have committed those things to memory because there were, I want to say probably 4 to 5 questions on military stuff on my test between short answer and multiple choice. And I can't say that I knew a single one of them. And so that is something that I should have focused on more highly as opposed to just the assumption of, well, it's going to be about child support, I'll get that right, as opposed to skimming over something that was told that it was going to be tested, and then it was tested.
I think it's safe to say everything they tell you is going to be tested will be tested.
That was absolutely true.
Well, Andy, congratulations. I really appreciate you spending the time with us and imparting your wisdom. And we wish you the best of luck in your career. And if we can ever help you out, just let us know. We'd be happy to return the favor.
Thanks so much, Eddie. I appreciate you including me, and I'm glad you're still batting 1,000 with all of us.
And thank you for sitting through all 6 tips. We hope this was beneficial. We hope that you will take the things that resonated with you and employ them. Everybody is different. We all have a different learning technique. So I think the best way to approach this is learn everybody's learning technique and figure out, you know, those elements that work for you and put them to use. I would be remiss to say that we do this every month. We have a monthly CLE where we talk about case law updates, board cert tips, We interview living legends. We have the folks who worked on the appeals. We give tech tips, and we also do some mental health awareness. All of this for a year, over 15 CLE credits, you get $350. We think that that is a fabulous deal. We deliver content every month on the month. It will start again on January 21st and continue for 12 months. You get all 12 episodes for $350. I think that's a really good deal. It's a great way to stay informed with the law and an awesome way to get those CLE credits. Plus, you're supporting an amazing job. I don't get paid for this. None of the attorneys that appear on this show get paid for this. All of the money generated by this project goes straight to the Center for Child Counseling, who helps the most vulnerable children in our community. They give counseling to those kids put into foster care. They're embedded in high-risk schools. They are creating a trauma-informed community, which is really what we need to understand the health of our fellow man and try to fix some of the issues that we have and that we're dealing with. So thank you for supporting the Center for Child Counseling. And we really hope you consider signing up for our annual CRLE that happens every month. And for more information on that, go to www.eddiestevens.com/CLE. Pretty easy. Thank you for your attention and do something that matters.